Hi everyone and welcome along to Sonic Academy with me, Chris Agnelli. Today we're joined by another legendary producer. He's one of my favourite producers and he's also known as an innovator in sound design and synthesis. Please welcome to Sonic Academy, Matt Lange. How are you, Matt?
I'm good, thank you, Chris. How are you?
I'm very, very good. We were just talking a bit off air just before we come on. You have been purchasing some new equipment. I've been looking at your Twitter this week. Can you tell us a bit about that? You've just got some the Eurorack stuff, is that correct?
Yeah, the Eurorack modular thing was kind of a topic that a lot of friends of mine who are in the more like esoteric sound design realm kept telling me that you have to get into it, you have to do it, and it's gonna like change everything. And so finally, I mean, I held out forever, and I finally just went and got like a basic system last week from Make Noise, and the wormhole's been opened. I mean, it's just a it's an endless wormhole of like cross-patching things into ways you can't do them, creating sounds that you could never really make in software. And even when you try to do software side kind of things, it sounds 100 times better.
Right.
It's like a living organism of sound creation.
And from somebody who's a bit of a Eurorack skeptic, you know, I find it's, you know, it's a mono synth, you know, it will sound fat and stuff. What does it bring to the table? You know, is it limiting, or do you find do you sample these sounds and then use them in tracks, or how do you layer them up?
To be honest, monophonic doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
Because I mean, usually what I personally use synths for most of the time is either bass, which, you know, is always going to be mono most of the time, or on occasion a lead. And again, that's kind of a monophonic thing. I don't really use synths for pads too much or anything like that. So for my purposes, no issue there. But well, here, this is just easier.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, the way I have it set up, this right here is my MIDI interface. Then I have two different oscillators. This one, the Make Noise DPO, is a kind of Buchla influenced complex waveform generator, and it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, as far as like creating these morphing, distorting, wave folding, and shaping waveforms and it's all analog. I mean, it just sounds like nothing else.
Yeah.
I moved it. This guy Braids, it's a digital oscillator, and it has about 30 different synthesis algorithms in it, and does everything from like analog modeling to Karplus strong physical modeling to like drum sound design, even like granular signs. There's just a multiple right here just for splitting signals. Matt's is, this one's actually, they call it a complex, or they call it a function generator, but what it really does is you have 4 channels, 2 of which can be an envelope or LFOs. You can trigger them off anything. It also has attenuators, so you can use the 2 middle channels to attenuate signals from anything else. And then we have just an envelope, then a MMG, which is just kind of like a pretty basic filter. It morphs between low pass and high pass, and then just a VCA after that. And what really makes it fun is the different ways you can just take signals and send them anywhere, and it has a sound that you can't get anywhere else. And the other thing about it too is there's so many like happy accidents and unexpected events that you would never really think of, because you're really just mucking around the entire time. Even if you know what you're doing, it's still, because you're gonna plug something in somewhere you're not supposed to be able to, and you just do, and you get this crazy sound that you never would have gotten any other way. So it's an obsession already.
Is there a danger that you could just sit and patch and repatch and you just get lost in this one little sound and completely lose sight of the rest of the sound? Is that a danger?
Yeah, that's absolutely a danger. That's actually like the biggest criticism some of my friends have had about Modular, is that a lot of people who do it, they just end up making weird, crazy sounds and patches, but they never actually create any music, and that's, you know, a subjective term right there. But the way I've personally designed my system was to be able to use like more stranger sound sources, but also make it playable so that I can, write with it and it's not just a noise maker.
Right. And just for people who don't know, how much would a small system like that sort of cost?
The first part of it was about $1,300.
Right.
And I mean, you can do it for less. I just chose, I wanted to get modules that you could get a lot of bang for the buck out of and could do a lot of complex things that you couldn't just do with like a normal analog synth or something like that. But I mean, it ranges. I mean, some people, have systems for under $1,000, and then you see systems that are a few $100,000.
Mr. Deadmau5 would like to price his system up and see how much that costs.
Actually, you probably don't want to. No one wants to do that.
And would you want to buy, maybe 2 or 3 of these systems, or how do you lay off if you want to, if you've got a bass sound, do you record that into your DAW and then repatch, or how does that work?
Yeah, the way I've just been doing it is once I create a patch, I just record it and get it in, and then kind of the fun thing is then I just take out all the cables and I can never recreate that patch ever again.
Right.
Like it was a once in the moment kind of thing, and the moment's gone.
Which is kind of interesting. It stops. I like that. It's that sort of thing that we don't have anymore, is committing to tape. Once you get it down, you can't touch it. That's it. You pull all the cables, and so is it a good discipline then? And, apart from noodling away patching cables, but once you get something sort of definitive, is it good to get it laid off the tape?
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of how I do everything anyway. I record most of like my things with mics or preamps. I mean, it's guitars, pianos, what have you, or vocals, and I don't really use a lot of MIDI. And the minute I do, I always print it down right away.
Right.
So it's kind of the same system. Or if I'm using like the machine drum or something, I mean, I always just make a sound, I record it, I get it in there, and I move on. And that's just always been part of my workflow.
Let's go back. We kind of jumped straight in because I was a bit fascinated about this system that you got. Let's go back to, how did you get into music? What was the sort of catalyst to get you where you are today?
I mean, I've kind of been doing it my entire life. My parents had me like taking piano lessons when I was 4 or 5. Did that for a few years, and then I sung in a boy choir from like age 7 to 13, something like that. And then as soon as my voice changed, I picked up the guitar. And I've been playing guitar for 15 years, something like that. And that led to me like initially wanting to get into recording just so I could like record my own demos for my band at the time. And that's what got me into like basic drum programming too. And all of that ended up taking me to Berklee College of Music, where then, that was, pretty high curriculum, everything, sound design, composition, all that. And it just kind of spiraled out from there. But I never really had, a choice almost as far as what I was going to do. It's like music was always what I did. And it's really one of the only things I actually ever cared about. And I don't know. I mean, both my parents are artists too. They're photographers. But I mean, so I grew up in an artistic family. And the whole concept of not being creative didn't exist.
At Berklee, you studied under Dr. Is it Boulanger?
Yeah.
Did you study C sound there?
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah.
And can you tell us, for those that don't know what C sound is, can you tell us a little bit about what it is and how it sort of forms audio?
Yeah.
It's a notation thing, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's a sort of a Word document notation sign.
Yeah, C sound's a programming language. Kind of similar to like C++, except it's tailored for sound design, sound generation. And it's literally just looking at, command line code. And, whatever you put in is what you're going to get out. And it's quite the learning curve.
And it's for somebody who came from a creative family, you were a player and stuff. How did the command line side of things sort of fit with your creative side? Is it something that ran well together?
No, not at all. I can't stand it, to be honest.
So you've never touched C sound since, have you?
Well, I do in different ways. I mean, one of my favorite things to use is a graphical front end of C sound called Cecilia.
Right.
Which it's, you're running C sound in the background, but it comes up with a graph, and you can do all like the cool sound design things like these crazy granular bits or spectral smearing, what have you. But but because you have this graph, then you can create all these gestural movements within every parameter. And I mean, it's stuff that even if you were coding it, it would take forever to code all these individual lines when you can just individually click in breakpoints along a graph. But you're running then the engine, and it sounds great. It sounds like nothing else.
How do you go from being a sort of, were you in a punk band, a guitarist and singer in a punk band? What was the trigger to get you into dance music?
It's kind of funny how that worked. I mean, yeah, I played in like a hardcore band, and what got me into like the programming side of it was, at the time I was really into like some of the Warp Records guys like Aphex Twin and Square Pusher. So I was, teaching myself just how to program beats, the kind of IDM beat kind of thing. And when I got to Berkeley, the thing that really changed it for me was I got into Telephone Tel Aviv. And the way they were doing everything with like acoustic instruments, Rhodes and guitars, these really like high-tech sci-fi, like perfectly crafted, IDM kind of beats, that really threw me over the edge, where I was like, wow, I really want to figure out how they do it like this. So I definitely got into the electronic thing just because I no longer needed a band. I could do everything by myself and be my own band. The dance music thing, I never planned on at all. I mean, to be honest, I never even liked dance music. I just, my first job out of school was working for a producer who was, very successful in dance music. So I was just thrown into that whole thing. And a year later, when I left the job, the doors kind of in that community had opened up, and I had a lot of connections. I just figured, I'm 22 years old now, I may as well, try to, see where this goes, maybe try to build up a fan base with this established thing, and then get back to what I really want to do, which is, more experimental or whatever. And now 6 years later, that's kind of, what I've been doing ever since, and it's working.
And you don't follow, obviously you weren't hugely in the scene, so you were probably just making stuff for yourself and stuff that you felt compositionally was much better, what you wanted to do. Do you find that helped you, that you were kind of unaware of the scene and sort of just did what you wanted to do?
Absolutely. Even my favorite artists in dance music are those who don't have dance music backgrounds.
Who are your favorite artists in dance music?
Andrew Bayer is of course one. Yeah. My friends usually are my favorite artists.
Okay.
But yeah, Andrew's one of them. Quiver, John Graham.
Yeah.
I love his work. Hybrid is huge for me, but again, that's kind of a different kind of thing. Sasha always does it for me, but that's kind of a different thing. That's from more like a DJ perspective. His records he does are like, I love Involver and everything like that. But again, it's taking, remixes of like live bands or, singer-songwriters and, putting a new spin on it, as opposed to just coming from soft synths and a drum machine or whatever. I don't know. To be honest, I don't even listen to that much of it these days.
you listen to a variety of things. Where do you get inspiration from? If you're sort of dry and you go, how do you get over this hump? What do you do to sort of, do you listen to alternate music or go for walks, or what's the thing that gets you over that creative stifle?
It's funny. The biggest thing, the trick that's always worked for me when I'm in a creative hump is a writing hump. I just do sound design for like a week.
Right.
And I just, go out field recording or, creating whatever here. And, I spend a week just cataloging and making a whole library of sounds. And usually by the end of that, I come out, wanting to write 20 different things. Because for me, sound design influences the composition process, and composition influences the sound design process for me. So it's really great, because whenever I get lost in one, I can just focus on the other, and it's, a feedback loop that can keep it going kind of indefinitely.
So let's touch upon the sound design. You're very much into field recording, manipulating audio, trying to get really weird things to happen. Where do your ideas come from? Where do you find those sources of, I know what to do, let's throw nails on a grand piano and record that and reverse it? And Where do you get the ideas from?
It could be anything, it doesn't have to be really too planned. That's kind of the fun thing. It's just like, what would happen if you take this and this,
Mm-hmm.
and see, and you never know. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I just want to try things that haven't necessarily been heard of before, or things that just aren't really traditional.
So you you take the recorder out to the field.
Yeah.
What do you look for? Do you look for metallic
Anything
things?
that's
Anything?
anything that's sonically interesting.
Right.
Um, the only criteria is I want it to sound cool, and that could be anything. It's as simple as just drop, like picking up like a bunch of like rocks and dropping them, getting like a kind of crunchy thing,
Mm-hmm.
or walking through the woods and creating hand claps out of breaking twigs. It's just anything that. Sorry, my cats are like freaking out about a box behind
We
me.
can see them in the back.
Yeah.
Is it a thing with producers? Every producer now has a cat. It must be like, is it a thing with DJs that they have to have a cat?
Well, you know what the thing is? I mean, I had a dog always, at least before I moved out to LA. And the great thing about having, two little creatures running around, I mean, our lives are pretty solitary, most of the time, we're just by ourselves in a studio pretty much all hours of the day. So just having some kind of like life form running around that you have to take care of or have some semblance of, of responsibility of,
Mm-hmm.
it just makes it nice. And, I'd probably go crazy if I didn't have something to take care of.
Cool.
And then on top of it, cats are great because when you travel, they'll be okay for a few days at a time.
You hope.
So you can go, your house might not be, but they'll be okay.
Just let's hope your flight isn't cancelled for like 24 hours. And
Right. Well, they'll survive a day or so, it's like, but like, it's not like you have to get up in the morning and walk them or anything like that.
That's true.
That's,
How do you? Let's go back to how do you? First of all, what's your DAW and how do you start a project? Is it? Do you start with beats? Do you listen to some stuff? Do you bring in some of your sound designs and manipulate audio? What's the catalyst to get you going?
Yeah. So I'm in Pro Tools.
Yeah, I saw photographs. I was doing a bit of research and I thought, because you were on about your buses.
Oh yeah.
yeah. And I saw Pro Tools. So is it difficult to produce in Pro Tools in MIDI and
No, it's actually the most natural thing for me.
Right.
I actually get furious if I have to work in anything else. And the main reason for me being is, I mean, I work primarily with audio.
Yeah.
And so anything that doesn't handle audio as well as Pro Tools does, I just can't deal with. As far as where I start, it could be anything. Sometimes it is, like if I want to do like a techno kind of thing, maybe I might start with drums. But a lot of times with that kind of thing, I mean, because my favorite kinds of techno are the kinds that have, kind of this some sound designy hook, really. It doesn't have to be a melodic hook, but just some weird sound that's the hook.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you create that sound designy part first, and then, build your beats around that. More melodic things, I mean, it's pretty rare things start with just drums for me if it's that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
just because I find I get too focused on, I guess, the beat, and I, kind of lose sight of what is really more important when it's a more melodic based thing. So I'd rather start with like a piano and guitar and, just come up with a melody, chord progression, what have you, the basic idea, and then, later add the beats to really accompany whatever the main idea is supposed to be. And the beats can change a lot because, I mean, sometimes you don't want a 4x4 thing. Sometimes it feels more natural to have a breakbeat or, halftime or what have you. And I feel like for me, if I'm starting and, if I'm trying to write something more melodic and I do the drums first, it's actually going to limit me because I'll be locked into what I feel like that beat is wanting to have, when ultimately it's a melodic record. The beat doesn't really matter as much as, at least the beat's not going to say what you're trying to say. It's going to be your melody.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we interviewed Hotmouth a few weeks ago, and he said the same thing. He was getting so bogged down with beats and noodling with beats that he completely lost sight, and nobody remembers a track because of the great beat. They remember the track because it has an amazing melody or chord change and stuff. How do you approach composition? How do you approach the chordal design, the progressions, or what gets you to go and that's correct, that's what I want to hear?
it's intuition.
Right.
That's really it. I mean, I think we all have our own personal harmonic leanings that, you know, we're all drawn to. I have my own, and I just know whenever I hit that spot for me, that's what feels good. And I mean, for me, I mean, it's generally something in a minor key, but often Dorian with like a raised six, or, you know, four majors are great. Like anything that has kind of melancholy feel to me has always been what I'm drawn to the most.
Do you write on piano or guitar or both? Is it just, do you just sit and noodle?
Either. It doesn't have to be either. I mean, it could sometimes be like a kalimba or a random dulcimer I have back there. I like it all. So a lot of times what I do is I'll put guitars in alternate tunings, especially if it's like an acoustic or something, because what that does do, it forces me out of my comfort zone where, you know, because it's really easy with guitar or even piano, just, you know, you rely on certain chord shapes and, you know, it's just familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you suddenly just detune it and put it in, you know, an open tuning or an unknown tuning, really, you no longer know what you're doing, really. I mean, like all your muscle memory, like aside from, you know, knowing how to, you know, pick and, you know, fret, that's all gone. So you're playing by ear at that point, and you're coming up with melodic ideas that you never would have really come up with just because you're used to playing a certain way.
Right.
So so that's one of my favorite things to do is, you know, put things in different tuning.
I mean, you've kind of refused to conform to one sound. You've always, you know, in your productions, you always seem to push and change. Is that what you do? I mean, when you're composing as well, you seem, you know, just from listening to what you say there, do you push yourself constantly with trying to learn new techniques, new skills, new ways of working? You never get comfortable. Is that correct?
No, I mean, you could say that about, you know, all aspects of my life, really. But yeah, no, I get bored very quickly if I'm doing the same thing. And so I always need to like find new ways to do it. And because also, I mean, I do music literally all day long, every day, unless, you know, I'm on the road. And it's so easy to get stagnant. So for me, like the way I do it is by working on like a ton of different projects that, you know, vary all over the place. And then at the same time, when I'm writing, just finding new ways to come up with new ideas or new ways to come up with old ideas, even just find ways to inspire me in ways I haven't thought of before, or just come up with ideas I wouldn't have thought of if I just stayed in the more familiar realm.
How do you find the whole? You've produced Glenn Johnson, is it Glenn Johnson's Glenn Morrison's album? Do you prefer the behind the desk sort of driver of a project, or do you like to be involved in being the forefront of composing and being you as the artist?
I love being in the spotlight always. I won't lie.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's refreshingly honest.
Yeah. No, but it's fun. You know, I like collaborating with people, and the great thing about producing other artists' albums is, again, it gets you into a different headspace, where it's a very different thing, where you're not worrying about, you know, necessarily what makes you happy, even though you should be happy with the work you're doing. But I mean, it essentially becomes client-based work in a way where you're figuring out ways to make them happy, and, you know, ultimately produce and create what they want to hear. And the fun part is finding ways to be excited about that yourself. I mean, if you just try to, you know, make whatever else is hearing, I mean, you're going to be bored. That sucks. No one wants to do that. I mean, they might want that, but I would be the wrong person to hire, you know? But I like working with other people just because it gets you thinking in different ways. I mean, collaboration's great because, you know, people put ideas in your head you never would have had in the first place. And especially when you're doing a different kind of record, like if you're doing a pop record, then the language you're using, it's no longer, you know, clubs with, you know, DJ intros, breakdowns, drops, whatever. I mean, then it all becomes about a song. And that's actually my favorite kind of thing to write, because everything else is ultimately bullshit at the end. Like, what people remember, you know, is the writing. And that's why I love doing the pop thing. And I mean, after Glenn, I did Blake Lewis's album, or
Mhm.
his new album, and then Tanya Zagar's album. And both of those were kind of like a futuristic, like intelligent pop kind of thing. Where at the end, it is all songwriting, and big melodies, top lines, everything like that. But we're trying to do it, in a futuristic way with like cool sound design, lots of live instrumentation, but highly processed, and, create something new. And that was exciting because it's taking a familiar format, but, trying to reinvent it in a way, but still make it accessible.
And Tanya's album, it's coming. It's not out yet. It's coming on Enhanced Records. Is that correct?
Yes, at some point. Not exactly sure when. I mean, it should be sooner than later.
Who knows with record companies these days? What?
Yeah, you never know.
What is what's the go-to synth? What's the Matt synth that, yes, this will get me out of a hole. This will get me going.
Well, now it'll probably be the Modular.
Yeah. Okay. Prior to the money hole.
Prior to the money hole, this is cheating. Contact.
Right. Why Contact?
Well, just actually the modular nature of it. The way, you can really, I mean, as a sound design tool, it's the most amazing sampler I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'll just take all these recordings, I've made, whether it's, it could be things I sampled out of like the Juno or the Virus or whatever, or, field recordings, and then the way you can manipulate them in Contact is great. And if it's not Contact, then it's Reactor. And that's another one because I have all these granular ensembles I made actually years ago when I was at Berkeley that, are just great for creating ambient pads or cool glitchy clicky things. I mean, that kind of does it. I'm not really a big synth guy, so
if you go to a synth, is it always sampled and chopped up and manipulated and has to be processed? Is that how you treat stuff?
Yeah, it's really rare anything's raw.
And what plugins then would you use? What's the sort of, is there a chain that you would love to you keep using or keep going back to? Yeah, plugin wise.
No, plugin wise, I'm pretty relaxed actually. I mean, aside from your normal stuff with EQs, compressors, things you can do with delays are always great. I like hardware a lot. So my favorite thing to use is I have an Eventide harmonizer, like a DSP 4000.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, my instant pad maker. I mean, I can, take anything, whether it's, it is the piano or it's like a granular patch or whatever, and throw it through like a giant, reverb algorithm out of the Eventide. Then you get a huge, lush, spacious thing. I mean, that's actually, every record has the Eventide on it. Then, I mean, I have an XFX too, which is like it's a guitar processor, kind of like a super Line 6 pod, but what's amazing about it also is it's almost like a Kima system in the way you can actually design patches and, create them in a modular way on your laptop, and it loads the patch right into the unit itself, and you can run anything through it and, create lots of cool sound design ideas.
What do you call this product again? Sorry, what do you say?
That's a Fractal Audio XFX.
Fractal audio alpha. And is it kind of a distortion? If it's like a Line 6, is it a sort of distortion?
Yeah, I mean, it's made primarily as, guitar processor, like, amp emulator, but it's got like 50 different effects in it, and, it's got built-in LFOs, and you can, patch it in a modular way. So you can get really creative with it.
Cool. And what are you, a UAD guy, a Waves guy? What's your stock plugins?
UAD, I love, for sure. Like, I love it until I max out the card.
Okay,
and,
yeah.
But I use them mostly for like character kind of stuff. Like LA2As, 1176s, that kind of thing. I don't really use the UAD stuff too much for kind of more
processing.
Yeah, like utilitarian kind of plugs. Like, I mean, my favorite EQ is actually DMG Audio Equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
And just the sheer amount of control you have over the thing is unparalleled. Compressors, usually usually the UAD, but if it's on a vocal, actually Wave C4.
Right.
Just because I love multiband compression. That's funny. I mean, I use the Sound Toy stuff a ton.
You use also is it GMR tools as well?
GRM tools, yeah.
I mean, they're
Yeah,
quite an old plugin. Oh,
shit. Yeah, that knocked off. Yeah, the GRM stuff is great as far as like kind of spectral processing and cool smearing, stretching, what have you.
Let's touch a bit on DJing then. How do you DJ? Is it pen drives, tractor? Is there a performance element with controllers?
Yeah. So these days it's all based around tractor, and and with tractor I have like the S4, then I have their F1, which is like a pad controller kind of thing. I use that for triggering loops or sound effects, and then on top of it, then I bring Machine also. And then Machine is synced to Tractor, and I'm using that as essentially a live drum machine effects maker. So I can program beats on the fly. I can, use the effects to create, tension, builds, drops, whatever.
And what has been the catalyst in the US over the last few years that this sort of huge EDM explosion has happened? What do you think has changed in the psyche of the country to sort of embrace it after ignoring it pretty much for 15 or so years?
I'm pretty cynical about the whole thing.
Okay.
I think from a business standpoint, as far as promoters go, it's way cheaper to get a DJ, than like a traditional band. You don't need all the insurance or all the extra backline, all the gear, all the roadies, the tour buses. It's pretty much most times it's a guy, standing on stage with, 2 CDJs and 2 thumb drives stuck in. And that's all they need. Yeah,
but I mean, if the audience didn't want to see the DJ, they wouldn't turn up, and therefore wouldn't work. There has been something has clicked in the American psyche to really embrace EDM in such a massive way.
It is, but it's also interesting to see the kind of EDM that they are embracing. It is, for the most part, kind of typical. There's really not much. In my jaded opinion, there's not much, interesting things going on in American EDM, and everything's just loud. And I mean, if you look at the composition now, like literally we've gotten to the point where it's a kick drum, maybe like, and it's usually now it's like a distorted 808 and like a little plucky, like chromatic melody on top. And that's what people go nuts for. And
that sounds like a Martin Garrix track.
And, no comment, and, and why you need, fucking vengeance loops to make something like that, I don't know. But, that's not me.
Matt, I mean, talking about clubs, outside of the LA Exchange and Avalon Hollywood, is there many smaller clubs catering for the more underground techno scene? Is there much diverse stuff happening in LA?
Yeah, there are a few. In LA, there's like Sound. And Sound, actually, they're in Hollywood and they have an amazing sound system. And they'll get a lot of the cooler guys. I think like Dubfire did their New Year's Eve party, but they'll do a lot of deep house guys too. There are a couple others. There's one called Couture, and it's not really happening yet. It could be, but the venue's not great. And I don't think they've just reached the point yet where they can pull the cooler names or anything like that. Exchange and Avalon still get really good people. So that's actually, Avalon's actually my favorite club in LA.
Right.
And my favorite to play and my favorite to go to. And they will, I think, like last time I was there is because Digweed was playing. And, anytime Digweed's playing, I will be there. Just because he's actually my favorite DJ.
As the t-shirt denotes.
Yeah, what?
And what about the rest of America? Where's the really cool pockets of America? Is it, Chicago, New York, East Coast, West Coast, the Deep South? Where's the cool?
I think it's actually, for me, like what's the cool thing is like it's New York has, Brooklyn is huge in New York now. There's so many great clubs there, but like Output is supposed to be amazing, and And then the other side of it, I would say, is LA, where there's so many options of what you could go to between the two cities. And at the same time, I mean, New York, there are going to be four big guys playing the same night you are.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing in LA. Those are kind of the hubs in my mind. As far as production goes, it's really become LA entirely, and that's ultimately what wiped out here. But from a live music perspective, it definitely, I think it's doing really great on those two hubs of the country.
And how do you find then moving from America to likes of Europe, Asia, Australia? Do you adjust your sound for those sort of different scenes?
You might. I mean, I've always lived in America, so.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, when you go to DJ in Europe, would you, play exactly the same set as you would in America, or would you sort of localize it, or in Asia?
Yeah, I mean, the way I do it, I kind of make no apologies for just being me, and I'm gonna play whatever I want to play or my kind of style, regardless of what
where you are
party I'm playing, which has ups and downs.
Yeah.
But that's just always been, I look at it as like, well, you booked me, so you're gonna get me. If you want to hear something else, then get someone else.
Matt, I want to thank you very much for joining us on sonicacademy.com today. It's been a real insightful interview and a real good chat. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I hope you have as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
No problem, Matt. Guys, thank you very much for watching, and I hope we'll see you all very, very soon.